Hello, I'm James Finn Cotter, and I'm going to read you 3 poems. The first, Before I Was Born, tells the story of my father and mother in Ireland and what took place in their lives before I ever existed. Behind me are 2 framed photographs. The first is of the barracks where my father was imprisoned during the Irish War of Independence. And the second is a formal photograph of my father and mother's wedding. Before I was born. Before I was born, Father plowed and planted his land in Slieve Gillane, above Inishannon on the River Bandon, and Shiphools, castles, ruins, where he carved his name. From his hill farm over Kinsale, above the blue Atlantic, he saw the Lusitania sink. Before I was born, my grandfather wrote a song about my father, interned a long year in Northern Ireland by the Black and Tans. Jimmy Cotter is my son's name, and a finer boy you will never find. He sang nights at Pat Russell's pub. Before I was born, my father was marched through the streets of Belfast, belted with rocks, hurled by jeering Orangemen, who left a scar on his chin. He could not understand why they hated him so. It was the British, not Irish, they were fighting. Before I was born, Brendan Ryan drew a watercolor sketch of number 16, Hut F. Coy, a bare rectangle barracks in cold Ballykinlar, with a prisoner list of 24 comrades, and my father's photo looking young, unsmiling. Before I was born, Father stood with Tad Barry at the barbed wire fence in Ballykinlar. "Stand back!" the sentry shouted. Tense, my father stepped back, but Tad hesitated and, looking up, was shot dead on the spot. A bloody handkerchief lay in our family hope chest. Before I was born, Michael Collins was killed in an ambush on the road between Bandon and Crookstown, shot by a sharp-shooting sniper. Next morning, my father cycled up from Inishannon and Upton to Beal-na-Blath Crossroad and wept for his dead hero. Before I was born, my father left Cork one morning in June without a word to his father, mother, sisters, friends. But Kitty knew he had sailed to send for her months later, paying her one-way passage, and wed her in Boston without a dowry. Before I was born, my father and mother sat for a black and white formal wedding portrait in a Boston studio. He, smiling and handsome, in dark suit and striped tie. She, pensive and pretty, in a pleated silk dress with a bouquet of flowers. Before I was born, Mother lifted a block of ice for the icebox on a hot July 4th, 7 months pregnant. Feeling sudden contractions, she called to my father to summon a taxi for Boston City Hospital, where I was born. Scenes from early childhood. This is a poem in 9 parts. 1. When I was 3, I went one day with my mother to a church. It was empty. She knelt to pray. I strolled aimlessly up the aisle to a side altar where a life-size statue of the Sacred Heart stood with heart crowned with thorns and flames, hands lifted in blessing. I looked up as the face came alive. Eyes stared down at me. Lips moved upward. I turned and ran past pews back to my mother and whispered, "God smiled at me." 2. I slept on an oil sheet at nighttime. It felt smooth and sleek and smelled tacky, like flat, stale chewing gum. I woke up in a pool of wet in the morning. Steadily, quietly, my mother changed the sheets of oilcloth and linen with kind and loving hands. "You'll soon grow out of this," she said, as she started to lead me from my room to the claw-foot bathtub with warm, running water. I sank into its warmth. 3. After Labor Day, I am standing alone at the curb after all my friends of the summer have left for school. When will I be able to go? How long must I be made to wait? Little then did I know that now, more than 80 years later, I am still in the classroom, recalling my teachers, starting with Miss Small, who in kindergarten taught me to draw round red apples that rival Paul Cézanne's. 4. Old Mr. Marshall, who lived upstairs at House Street, sat me on his lap and sang, "Ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross," bounced me up and down on his knees. White-haired Mrs. Marshall served milk chocolate biscuits. My family moved away, and I never saw old Mr. Marshall again. 20 years later, I met Mrs. Marshall, who at 104 still lived in Dorchester with her 80-year-old niece. 5. Standing at the hilltop with my new Christmas sled, a flexible flyer, I waited for the chance to take a leaping start to fly on the hard-packed snow to the street below. My 2 hands gripped tight to the steering crosspiece. Prone on the running board, I let go and landed full speed on the smooth white snow. Free as the wind blowing in my face, I raced down fast and faster and smashed head-on into an oak. 6. Mother had gone again into the hospital. Feeling sorry for myself, I moped around the house, drew Thanksgiving turkeys, and played with my toy cars. She came home and called me to come to her bedside. She held my hands and said she missed not being there for the holidays. I looked away from her and gave a glum reply, knowing nothing then of the sister or brother who never could come home. 7. Riding on the tricycle with my sister Mary, I stood on the back rung with outstretched arms like wings. while she steered and pedaled. I made believe we were in a circus, wheeling up high in the big top, and I soaring in air. 3 years later, Margie joined us, and 11 years after her, Kathy came. I said that I wanted a brother. Instead, God sent another sister. With her carriage, I strolled proudly down St. Gregory Street. 8. Ready or not, here I come. I call from home base, the elm in our front yard on Jerome Street. That dusk, I'm it for hide and seek with kids from Cushing Hill, Mary, Margie, Bernie, Fran, Ann, Melvin, and Joyce, all hiding someplace in the neighborhood. I count to 100 with arm over my eyes. I whirl out and catch Joyce, who's it. All ye entry. Scoot back, safe to home base before you are tagged it. 9. I am walking balanced on a wall on Hancock Street to Upham's Corner Market with my mother. From a house across the way, I hear a woman calling, "Jimmy!" Who is calling me, I wonder. It's not you, it's someone else, my mother tells me. How can someone else be me? Months later, I wake from a nightmare, not knowing who or where I am. I rush to Mother's bed. "You are here," she whispered. The previous 2 poems were unrhymed. This poem is a single rhyme that runs throughout the whole poem. The day I die. The day I die will be in my obituary. As yet, I cannot see temporarily, in its reality, the date that destiny has set aside for me. The day I die must be part of my history, of memento mori, since the mystery remains withheld from me until eternity sets me entirely free. The day I die can be the start of a journey into the bright, starry, heavenly harmony of this great galaxy, another odyssey across an unknown sea. The day I die shall be the moment of unity, when my humanity and his divinity meet at last, lovingly to end my short story in unending glory. The day I die may be Father's anniversary, today, December 3, some year from now. You see, there is one surety to life's finality. What will be, will be.